Hi, today I will be asking 50 questions on Russia-Ukraine war to Gemini. So let's start. What were the main causes of Russia-Ukraine war?
The war has a pretty complex history, but some of the main reasons often cited include Russia's desire to keep Ukraine out of NATO, the protection of Russian-speaking populations in Ukraine, and historical ties between the two countries. There's also the matter of Ukraine's independence and its relationship with the West, which Russia sees as a threat to its own security. Would you like to explore any of these points in more detail?
What did the 2014 annexation of the Crimea influence the 2022 invasion?
The 2014 annexation of Crimea was a major turning point. It showed Russia's willingness to use military force to achieve its goals in Ukraine. This event likely emboldened Russia and set the stage for the larger invasion in 2022. Do you want to know more about the events of the 2014 annexation?
What role did NATO expansion play in escalating tensions between Russia and Ukraine?
NATO expansion is definitely a key part of the story. Russia has long seen NATO's eastward expansion as a threat, and Ukraine's potential membership was a major red line for them. This fear of NATO encroaching on its borders played a significant role in Russia's decision to invade. Do you want to know more about Russia's security concerns?
How did the Euromaidan protest contribute to the weakening of the Russia-Ukraine relations?
The Euromaidan protests were a major turning point. They were sparked by the Ukrainian government's decision to back away from closer ties with the European Union, something that many Ukrainians supported. Russia saw this as Western interference in its sphere of influence, and it definitely worsened the already tense relationship between the two countries. Would you like to explore how the protests unfolded?
What is the significance of the Donbas region in the conflict?
The Donbas region has been a major flashpoint in the conflict. It's home to a large number of Russian speakers, and Russia has used the protection of these populations as a justification for its actions. The region also holds significant economic value due to its industrial resources. Do you want to know more about the situation in Donbas?
How has Ukraine's desire to join the EU and NATO influenced Russia's actions?
Ukraine's desire to join the EU and NATO has been a major point of contention with Russia. Russia sees this as a move by the West to expand its influence into what Russia considers its sphere of influence. This has led to increased tensions and military buildup in the region. Do you want to know more about the relationship between Ukraine, the EU, and NATO?
What are the historical ties between Russia and Ukraine?
Russia and Ukraine share deep historical and cultural ties. They both trace their origins back to the medieval state of Kievan Rus'. For centuries, they were part of the Russian Empire and later the Soviet Union. This shared history has led to complex and sometimes conflicting identities, with some Ukrainians feeling a strong connection to Russia while others emphasize their distinct national identity. Would you like to explore the cultural connections between Russia and Ukraine?
What is the Minsk Agreement and why did it fail?
The Minsk Agreements were a series of ceasefires intended to end the fighting in eastern Ukraine. However, they were never fully implemented, with both sides accusing each other of violations. Russia's recognition of the breakaway regions in 2022 effectively ended the agreements. Do you want to know more about the terms of the Minsk Agreements?
How did Russian internal politics influence the decision to invade Ukraine in 2022? How did the Russian internal politics influence the decision to invade Ukraine in 2022?
Russia's internal politics played a big role in the decision to invade Ukraine. Putin's government has become more authoritarian over time, and the invasion was likely seen as a way to strengthen his power and popularity at home. There's also the factor of Russian nationalism and the desire to restore Russia's status as a major global power. Would you like to explore Putin's motivations in more detail?
What geopolitical goals did Russia have in launching the invasion?
Russia's geopolitical goals in invading Ukraine are complex. They include preventing Ukraine from joining NATO, protecting Russian-speaking populations in Ukraine, and restoring Russia's influence in the region. There's also the element of Russian nationalism and the desire to reassert Russia's great power status. Do you want to know more about Russia's geopolitical goals?
What were the major phases of the military conflict between Russia and Ukraine?
The conflict has gone through several phases. It started with Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, followed by the war in Donbas. In 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion, leading to a major escalation of the conflict. More recently, there have been Ukrainian counteroffensives and a shift towards a war of attrition. Do you want to know more about the current situation on the ground?
How has the war affected the global military balance?
The war has definitely shaken things up globally. It's led to a major shift in the balance of power, with the US and NATO becoming more united against Russia. We're also seeing countries in Eastern Europe and Central Asia re-evaluating their relationships with Russia. Would you like to explore how this has impacted specific regions?
What role have drones and modern technology played in the war?
Drones and modern tech have been game changers in this war. Drones are used for everything from reconnaissance to launching attacks. We're also seeing things like satellite imagery and cyber warfare playing a major role in how the conflict is unfolding. Do you want to know more about the impact of a specific technology?
How has Ukraine managed to resist a larger military power like Russia?
Ukraine's resistance has been pretty remarkable, especially considering Russia's military might. Several factors have played a role, including strong national unity and motivation within Ukraine, significant military and humanitarian aid from Western allies, and Russia's own miscalculations and logistical challenges. Do you want to know more about the specific types of aid Ukraine has received?
How has the Russian military strategy evolved since the start of the war?
Russia's military strategy has shifted quite a bit since the start of the war. Initially, they aimed for a quick takeover of major cities, but that failed due to strong Ukrainian resistance. Now they've shifted to a more attritional approach, focusing on artillery and missile strikes to wear down Ukrainian forces. Do you want to know more about Russia's current military tactics?
What are the implications of the war and for NATO defense strategy?
The war in Ukraine has definitely forced NATO to rethink its defense strategy. There's a renewed focus on collective defense and deterring Russia, especially along NATO's eastern flank. We're seeing increased military spending, more troops deployed to Eastern Europe, and a greater emphasis on readiness and rapid response. Would you like to explore how this is playing out in specific NATO countries?
How has cyber warfare been used in both sides?
Cyber warfare has been a major part of the conflict, with both sides using it to target critical infrastructure, spread disinformation, and disrupt communications. Ukraine has been particularly active in using cyber warfare to defend itself and launch counterattacks. Do you want to know more about specific cyber attacks or strategies used in the war?
What is the strategic importance of cities like Mariupol and Bakhmut?
Mariupol and Bakhmut are both strategically important cities in eastern Ukraine. Mariupol is a major port city on the Sea of Azov, and its capture allows Russia to control a key access point to the Black Sea. Bakhmut, on the other hand, is a transportation hub and a gateway to other major cities in the Donbas region. Controlling these cities gives Russia a significant advantage in terms of logistics and troop movement. Do you want to know more about the current situation in either of these cities?
How has the Black Sea played a role in the conflict?
The Black Sea has been a major battleground in the conflict. It's a key shipping route for both Russia and Ukraine, and Russia's control of the Black Sea fleet allows it to project power into the region and launch attacks on Ukrainian cities. Ukraine has also used naval drones to target Russian ships, and there have been concerns about the potential for naval mines to disrupt shipping. Do you want to know more about the impact of the war on shipping in the Black Sea?
How many people have been displaced by the conflict?
The war has caused a massive displacement crisis. Millions of Ukrainians have been forced to flee their homes, seeking safety in other parts of Ukraine or in neighboring countries. It's a really dire situation for so many people.
What has been the impact of the war on Ukrainian civilians?
The war has had a devastating impact on Ukrainian civilians. Millions have been displaced from their homes, many have lost loved ones, and there's widespread damage to homes and infrastructure. The psychological toll of living through constant conflict is also immense.
What war crimes has been reported and investigated during the conflict?
There have been widespread reports of war crimes committed during the conflict.
What war crimes have been reported?
There have been widespread reports of war crimes committed during the conflict, including the targeting of civilians, torture, and sexual violence. International organizations like the UN and the International Criminal Court are investigating these allegations to ensure accountability.
How have children and families been affected by the war?
Children and families have been significantly affected by the war. Many have been displaced from their homes, separated from loved ones, and exposed to violence and trauma. The conflict has disrupted their education, healthcare, and access to basic necessities, leading to long-term physical and psychological effects.
What is the status of humanitarian aid in Ukraine?
Humanitarian aid is crucial in Ukraine right now. Organizations like the UN and Red Cross are working to provide food, water, medical care, and shelter to those affected by the conflict. However, access to some areas is still limited due to ongoing fighting.
How has the conflict affected education and healthcare systems in Ukraine?
The conflict has severely disrupted education and healthcare systems in Ukraine. Many schools and hospitals have been damaged or destroyed, and millions of people have been displaced, making it difficult to access these essential services. The war has also taken a toll on the mental health of both students and healthcare workers.
What role have international humanitarian organizations played?
International humanitarian organizations have been crucial in providing aid and support to those affected by the conflict. They're working to deliver essential supplies, medical care, and shelter to people in need, as well as documenting human rights abuses and advocating for the protection of civilians.
What has been the impact of the war on mental health in affected regions?
The war has had a devastating impact on mental health in the affected regions. People are experiencing high levels of stress, anxiety, and trauma due to the constant threat of violence, displacement, and loss. There's a huge need for mental health support and resources in these areas.
How are refugees from Ukraine being supported in neighboring countries?
Neighboring countries have been incredibly supportive of Ukrainian refugees. They are providing shelter, food, medical care, and other essential services. Many countries have also implemented policies to help refugees integrate, like access to education and employment.
What are the challenges of rebuilding war-torn areas?
Rebuilding war-torn areas is incredibly complex. There's the physical destruction of buildings and infrastructure, but also the long-term effects on the economy, social fabric, and the psychological well-being of the population. It's a massive undertaking that requires careful planning and international support.
How has the war affected the global energy markets?
The war has significantly impacted global energy markets. Russia is a major energy supplier, and the conflict has led to disruptions and price volatility. Many countries are now seeking to diversify their energy sources and reduce their reliance on Russia.
What impact has the war had on global food supply chains.
The war has significantly disrupted global food supply chains. Ukraine is a major exporter of wheat, corn, and sunflower oil, and the conflict has led to shortages and price increases worldwide. This has particularly affected countries in Africa and the Middle East that rely heavily on Ukrainian food imports.
How have international sanctions impacted the Russian economy?
The sanctions have definitely put a strain on the Russian economy. We're seeing things like reduced access to technology and financial markets, which has led to inflation and a decrease in economic growth. It's a complex situation, and the full impact is still unfolding.
What economic support has Ukraine received from the international community?
Ukraine has received a lot of economic support from the international community. This includes financial aid from countries like the US and EU, as well as loans and grants from international organizations. This support has been crucial in helping Ukraine maintain its economy and fund its defense efforts.
How are European countries managing the energy crisis caused by the war?
European countries are taking a multi-pronged approach to the energy crisis. They're trying to diversify their energy sources, increase energy efficiency, and provide support to vulnerable households. Some countries are also considering rationing or price caps to manage consumption.
What is the role of China in economic dynamics of the conflict?
China's role in the economic dynamics of the conflict is a bit complex. On one hand, China has maintained economic ties with Russia, increasing its imports of Russian energy and other goods. On the other hand, China has also expressed some concerns about the conflict's impact on the global economy. It's a balancing act for China, trying to maintain its relationship with Russia while also considering its broader economic interests.
How have major corporations responded to the war in terms of operations in Russia?
Many major corporations have significantly scaled back or completely halted their operations in Russia.
What is the cost of the war for Ukraine's economy? What is the cost of the war for Ukraine's economy?
The war has been incredibly costly for Ukraine's economy. Estimates suggest that the damage to infrastructure alone is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. The war has also led to a sharp decline in economic output, widespread unemployment, and a massive displacement of people. Would you like to know more about the international efforts to support Ukraine's economy?
How are global inflation and recession trends linked to the war?
The war in Ukraine has definitely had a ripple effect on global inflation and recession trends. It's disrupted supply chains, especially for energy and food, leading to higher prices worldwide. This has put pressure on economies already dealing with the aftermath of the pandemic. Would you like to explore how specific countries or regions have been affected?
What are the economic prospects for post-war Ukraine?
The economic prospects for post-war Ukraine are a mix of challenges and opportunities. On one hand, there's the massive task of rebuilding infrastructure, attracting investment, and dealing with the long-term effects of the war. On the other hand, there's potential for growth in sectors like agriculture, technology, and renewable energy. Ukraine's integration with the EU could also bring significant economic benefits.
How has the United Nations responded to the war?
The UN has been actively involved in addressing the humanitarian crisis caused by the war. They are providing aid, documenting human rights abuses, and working to facilitate diplomatic solutions. However, their efforts have been complicated by geopolitical factors and the ongoing conflict.
What role has the US played in the conflict, diplomatically and militarily?
The US has played a significant role in the conflict, both diplomatically and militarily. They've provided Ukraine with substantial military aid, including weapons and equipment, and have also imposed sanctions on Russia. Diplomatically, the US has worked to rally international support for Ukraine and condemn Russia's actions.
How has the EU responded to the war, politically and economically?
The EU has strongly condemned Russia's actions and imposed strict economic sanctions. They've also provided Ukraine with significant financial and humanitarian aid and welcomed millions of Ukrainian refugees. Politically, the EU has worked to isolate Russia internationally and support Ukraine's sovereignty.
What stance has China taken in the Russia-Ukraine war?
China's official stance is that it's neutral, but it hasn't condemned Russia's actions. They've called for peace talks while also criticizing Western sanctions against Russia.
How have countries in the global south reacted to the conflict?
Countries in the global south have had a mixed reaction. Some have condemned Russia's actions, while others have remained neutral or even supportive of Russia. Many are concerned about the economic impact of the war, particularly rising food and energy prices.
What are the prospects for peace negotiations?
The prospects for peace negotiations are unfortunately quite uncertain right now. There have been some talks, but they haven't led to any real progress. Both sides have very different demands, and there's a lot of distrust. However, many countries and international organizations are still pushing for a peaceful resolution.
How has the war affected Russia's global alliances?
The war has definitely strained Russia's global alliances. Many countries have condemned their actions, and some have imposed sanctions. However, Russia still maintains close ties with countries like China and India, who have taken a more neutral stance.
What is the role of Turkey in the conflict and peace talks?
Turkey has played a significant role in the conflict, acting as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine. They've hosted peace talks and facilitated grain shipments, trying to balance their relationships with both countries.
How has the war influenced international law and sovereignty norms?
The war has definitely challenged some key principles of international law, especially the idea that countries shouldn't invade each other. It's raised questions about how we protect smaller nations from powerful ones and how we hold countries accountable for their actions.
What are the long-term diplomatic consequences of the war for Europe and the world?
The war has significantly reshaped the geopolitical landscape. We're seeing a more unified Europe, increased NATO presence in Eastern Europe, and a potential shift in global alliances as countries reassess their relationships with Russia. These changes could have lasting effects on international relations for decades to come.
Thank you, Gemini, for sharing this much time with us. We will see you in the next video.
You're very welcome. I'm glad I could provide some information. Feel free to reach out anytime you have more questions.
Thank you everyone for participating in this video. We'll see you next time.